Velith did not enter a room. She altered it. Her body carried the kind of abundance the pack pretended not to see and could not stop watching. Full hips that swayed with unintentional confidence, a waist that curved inward as if shaped by defiance itself, thighs strong from labor yet undeniably lush. Everything about her spoke of warmth, of life, of a femininity that refused to apologize for taking up space. Her chest was generous, heavy enough to pull eyes no matter how carefully she dressed, rising and falling with a steady breath that betrayed none of the tension coiling around her. Even wrapped in the plain tunic of an omega, her shape refused to be hidden. Cloth clung where it should not. Shadow traced where it should not linger. That was her crime. Her beauty was not sharp or ornamental. It was ruinous. Dark hair fell thick down her back, untamed, catching light like spilled ink. Her skin held a natural glow, not polished, not delicate, alive. Her face was soft in the way that made people underestimate her. Full lips set in a calm line, eyes deep and observant, carrying restraint instead of invitation. She did not flirt. She did not beckon. She simply existed. And that was enough to ignite hunger she never fed. Males noticed first. Glances held too long, jaws tightening, arguments sparked over nothing when she passed. Then the women noticed the noticing. Whispers curdled into resentment. Desire became accusation. Velith kept her head high through it all. She had learned early that shrinking only sharpened cruelty. So she walked as she was, voluptuous, unclaimed, unashamed, bearing a body the pack wanted to punish her for owning. When two ranked males nearly came to blows over her in the common hall, she did not raise her voice. "I belong to no one," she said calmly. The room went still. Refusal was allowed. Protection was not. And so the pack chose to starve her, delay her suppressants, strip comfort instead of confronting their own weakness. Velith endured. Because even then, before power, before titles, she understood the truth they feared most. Her body drew attention. Her will would one day command it. The fight started before Velith spoke a single word. Two ranked males, both marked, both married, caught her scent at the same time near the East training ring. It wasn't flirtation. It wasn't invitation. It was biology meeting ego, and ego always lost first. A shoulder clipped another. A growl answered, hands fisted. Steel rang as someone hit the weapons rack. Velith stepped back instinctively. Too late. By the time claws threatened to break skin, the women had already gathered. Not to stop it. To decide who would pay for it. Her. "She walks like that on purpose," Ophira murmured, loud enough to be heard. "Look at her." Velith wore the same rough tunic as every other Omega. Same boots, same braid pulled tight to avoid attention. None of it mattered. Her body had always betrayed her. Hips too full, chest too heavy, scent too warm. Nature's poor joke. "She refuses to be claimed," Lysentha said, voice cool and cutting. "This is what happens when rules are bent." The males were dragged apart. One spat blood. The other wouldn't stop staring at Velith. Fury and want tangled together. The Alpha King arrived without announcement. Malrek Ashbourne's presence silenced the ring. He took in the scene in one sweep. The males, the women, the Omega standing alone at the edge like a misplaced thing. "Report," he said. Lysentha stepped forward. An Omega incited a dominance conflict. Malrek's eyes settled on Velith, heavy, assessing, unkind but not cruel. "Did you provoke them?" he asked. Velith met his gaze. "No. No tremor, no softness. A mistake, perhaps." "Refusal is permitted," Malrek said after a pause. "Protection is not." The sentence fell like a blade. The women exhaled together. Victory. Effective immediately, Malrek continued, already turning away. The Omega's rations are reduced. Heat suppressants delayed until reassessment. Vayleth felt it then. The slow burn under her skin. The warning coil low in her belly. Delayed suppressants were not an inconvenience. They were a threat. As the pack dispersed, no one stood with her. Not one. Vayleth remained where she was, hungry already, heat ticking closer with every breath. They thought this would break her. They had mistaken endurance for weakness. If you're ready to see Vayleth turn punishment into power, like and subscribe, and support the channel by clicking the hype button. This is only the beginning. Lysentha chose the hour carefully. Midday, when the pack gathered for rations, when witnesses were unavoidable and silence could be mistaken for agreement. She stood at the center platform with her hands folded, calm as ceremony, righteous as tradition. Vayleth was summoned, not invited. She stepped into the ring of eyes alone. "This is not punishment," Lysentha announced. "This is correction, for the good of the pack." The words were familiar, comfortable. They had been used on generations of women who learned too late that good was flexible, and pack rarely included them. "You refuse to be claimed," Lysentha continued. "You incite unrest among bonded males. You disrupt order simply by existing without restraint." Murmurs rippled outward. Approval, relief, fear dressed up as virtue. Vayleth listened. She did not lower her head. At the edge of the gathering, Malrek Ashbourne watched. His posture was relaxed, his attention sharp. He said nothing. Kings rarely interrupted female law. It kept the peace cheaply. Lysentha turned to Vayleth at last. "You will apologize, publicly. You will acknowledge your role and vow to correct your conduct." There it was. The exit. The small humiliation that would have bought her silence, and a fraction of safety. Vayleth looked around the circle. She saw Ophira's tight smile, Bryalin's careful distance, Marith's eyes flick away, ashamed and grateful it wasn't her. Then she looked back at Lysentha. "No," Vayleth said. The word landed badly, too clean, too final. A hush swallowed the square. "I did not provoke them," Vayleth continued, voice even. "I did not invite attention. I broke no rule." Lysentha's expression hardened. "Intent is irrelevant. Impact matters." "Then punish the impact," Vayleth said. "Not the body you dislike." That was the moment. Not when Lysentha raised her chin. Not when whispers sharpened into something meaner. But when Malrek's gaze lifted, just slightly, and fixed on Vayleth with new interest. Refusal, spoken aloud, changed the air. "So be it," Lysentha said. "By female law you are excluded from communal circles, shared meals, gatherings. Aid, social exile, official, absolute." Vayleth felt it settle, heavier than hunger, colder than delayed heat, loneliness enforced by consensus. Malrek said nothing. He turned away. The pack dispersed as if relieved, as if balance had been restored. Vayleth remained where she was, alone in plain sight. She did not apologize, and that was the choice that would cost her everything, or buy her power. Vayleth learned quickly what social exile really meant. It wasn't silence, it was proximity without kindness. Bodies brushing past her in corridors, conversations dying the moment she entered a room. Eyes followed her now. Male eyes, sharp with calculation. Protection had been withdrawn. Opportunity had not. He cornered her near the grain stores, where the scent of dried wheat meant no one lingered long. Carrick, a lesser alpha with a narrow scar across his jaw and ambition written into his posture. "You're making things harder than they need to be," he said, voice low, reasonable. He stood close enough that his dominance pressed against her skin like heat. Vayleth shifted her weight, keeping her tone flat. "Move." Carrick smiled. "I can't, not until you hear me." He glanced around. You're exposed, unprotected. The women are circling. I don't like waste. There it was. Concern shaped like entitlement. I'll claim you, he continued. Not publicly. Quiet. You get shelter, rations restored, suppressants on time. I get rights. Vayleth looked at him. Not at the offer, but at the assumption underneath it. No, she said. One word. Calm. Absolute. Carrick's smile thinned. Think carefully. I have. A pause stretched. Something shifted behind him. Malrek Ashbourne stood at the far end of the corridor, half-shadowed, as if he had been there longer than either of them realized. He did not interrupt. He did not intervene. He listened. You're choosing hardship, Carrick said, irritation creeping in. For pride. I'm choosing myself, Vayleth replied. She stepped around him. He did not stop her. By nightfall, the story had changed. She wasn't refusing protection anymore. She was teasing, playing a dangerous game, enjoying the attention. Men began watching her openly, curiosity sharpening into want. The women stopped whispering. They stared. Hate, no longer disguised as concern. Vayleth felt it everywhere, in the way doors closed slower, in the way silence followed her steps. Refusal had not cooled desire. It had ignited it. From the upper balcony, Malrek observed the pack recalibrating around a single unclaimed Omega, and for the first time, Vayleth understood the truth. Saying no had not made her invisible. It had made her a problem. The reassignment came without ceremony. Vayleth found her name scratched onto a slate outside the Black Ledger Hall at dawn, the ink still wet enough to smear. No explanation. No escort. Just a door few Omegas ever approached without being dragged. The hall was not a place of claws or blood. It was worse. Shelves climbed the stone walls from floor to ceiling, packed with ledgers bound in dark hide, supply routes, ration counts, patrol losses, execution orders. Every decision the pack had ever made, written down so it could never be denied. The air smelled of dust and old iron. You'll copy, the steward said without looking at her. Correct. Tally. Cross-check. Vayleth glanced at the ledgers. Weeks of work. Months, more likely. This isn't Omega labor, she said quietly. The steward snorted. It's not anyone's labor. That's the point. She learned the rule before noon. Knowledge outranked blood. A well-kept ledger could strip an alpha of command faster than a blade. A misplaced mark could starve a patrol or erase a death. Mistakes were not forgiven. They were punished. By evening, her fingers ached. Ink stained her skin like bruises. She ate standing, alone, her reduced rations barely enough to dull the edge of hunger. A scribe leaned close as she worked. No Omega lasts here, he murmured. Not unkind, not mocking, a statement of fact. They break, or they beg to be claimed. Vayleth did neither. She learned patterns instead, which names appeared too often in loss reports. Which patrols returned light, which punishments were recorded, and which were quietly omitted. By the third night, she stopped copying blindly. She started understanding. Somewhere beyond the hall's thick doors, the pack howled, lived, fought, mated. Vayleth sat beneath flickering lamplight, surrounded by the truth no one wanted touched. The Black Ledger Hall was meant to erase her. Instead, it taught her something dangerous. Power wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was written in ink, and waiting for someone patient enough to read it. Vayleth found the mistake at dawn. It was small, almost elegant in its danger. A single line item buried 3 ledgers deep. Grain issued to the Northern Patrol, recorded twice. On paper, they were fed. In reality, they would receive nothing for 6 days. 6 days meant hunger. 8 meant collapse. 10 meant death. Valeth stared at the numbers until they stopped swimming. She knew the rule of the hall. Do not alter without authorization. Correction required rank. Rank required blood or sponsorship. She had neither. She could copy the error and sleep. Instead, she took the stylus. One line struck through, one margin note added, one seal requested. The patrol received their grain by midday. They never knew how close they had come to starving. Valeth did. The punishment came before sunset. She was dragged before the hall steward, ink still under her nails. Lysentha stood nearby, satisfaction thinly veiled. "You altered a ledger," the steward said, "without authority. I corrected it. You are an Omega." The distinction was enough. Valeth was sentenced to night labor. No lamp, no heat. Copying punitive tallies until her hands shook and her vision blurred. Her rations were cut again. Her suppressants postponed another cycle. The lesson was clear. Accuracy is insubordination when it comes from the wrong mouth. From the upper tier of the hall, Malrek Ashbourne watched in silence. He saw the correction. He saw the patrol's requisition fulfilled. He saw the punishment authorized. He said nothing. Not because he hadn't noticed, but because he had. That night, as Valeth worked in the cold with cramped fingers and an empty belly, she understood the deeper truth. This was not cruelty. It was evaluation. She had made her first mistake. She had proven she was useful. Valeth felt it before dawn. The heat rose wrong, too fast, too sharp, curling low in her body like a warning flare. Her skin burned beneath her clothes. Every sound scraped, every scent pressed too close. Early heat was dangerous even with suppressants. Without them, it was a sentence. She went to the dispensary anyway. Rules demanded the attempt. The keeper didn't look up. "Denied." "On whose authority?" "Policy," he said, finally meeting her eyes. "Not unkind. Final. Delayed sanctions are still active." Valeth nodded once and turned away. By midday, the pack could smell it. Males lifted their heads as she passed. Conversations stalled. One hand tightened on a table edge hard enough to splinter wood. Another male physically removed himself from the corridor, jaw clenched, breath ragged. Protection had been withdrawn. This was what that meant. Someone brushed too close behind her. She stopped. Slowly. Let the silence stretch. "Don't," she said, voice low and steady. The male froze, then stepped back, shaken, ashamed. Valeth didn't wait for the next test. She went straight to the black ledger hall and barred the door from the inside. Stone walls, cold air, no windows. She sat on the floor between shelves of recorded judgment, back against the truth of the pack itself. Sweat slicked her skin. Her pulse thudded in her ears. Every instinct screamed for relief, for touch, for surrender. She closed her eyes and breathed. Hours passed, then more. Her hands shook as she worked, copying figures, grounding herself in numbers, ink, structure. When dizziness hit, she leaned into it. When nausea rose, she swallowed it down. Control was not comfort. It was choice, made again and again. Near dawn, her vision grayed. She slumped against the shelves, heart racing, body trembling on the edge of collapse, but unclaimed. Unused. When the door finally opened, Malrek Ashbourne stood there. He took in the scene in a single glance. The barred door, the scattered ledgers, the Omega still upright by will alone. He said nothing. He closed the door again and left her to finish what she had chosen. Valeth slid down the wall, breath shallow, victorious in the quietest way that mattered. She had endured heat without mercy, and she had remained her own. Valeth was 3 lines into the morning tally when the temperature in the black ledger hall changed. Not heat. Pressure. She looked up. Malrek Ashbourne stood at the threshold, tall enough that the doorway seemed built around him. not the other way around. No guards, no announcement, just the quiet authority of a king who did not need witnesses to be obeyed. The steward stiffened. Every scribe froze. "You," Malrek said, his gaze fixed on Vaelith. "Come." No title, no explanation. The walk through the keep felt longer than it was. Vaelith kept her eyes forward, her stride measured, her pulse locked down by discipline alone. She was led not to the council chamber, but to a narrow war room lined with maps, sealed crates, and red-stringed ledgers few ever touched. Malrek closed the door himself. "You altered a grain ledger," he said. "Yes." "You saved a patrol." "Yes." "You violated protocol." "Yes." He studied her in silence, as if weighing not her answers but the way she delivered them. "I've been watching you since the corridor," Malrek said at last. "Since you refused to apologize, since you chose isolation over permission." Vaelith did not react. "Do you know why I said nothing?" he asked. "Because intervention would have made me dependent," she replied. A pause. Sharp. Dangerous. "That," Malrek said quietly, "is the correct answer." He moved to the table and unrolled a map of the western supply routes. Several locations were marked in black ash. "Someone is bleeding this pack," he continued. "Grain, weapons, medicine, quietly enough to avoid panic, boldly enough to insult me." Vaelith's eyes followed the lines. The pattern was there, if you knew how to read absence. "The thefts appear random," Malrek said. "They are not." "No," Vaelith agreed. "They're staggered, rotational, designed to implicate the border packs." Malrek's mouth curved slightly. Not a smile. A test passed. "The trail leads to a ranked family," he said. "Name it." Vaelith exhaled slowly and leaned over the table. "The House of Bryolin," she said. "By marriage, not blood. Their accounts are too clean. No waste, no loss. That's where the excess is going." Silence fell heavy. "Prove it," Malrek said. The audit he assigned her was impossible by design. 7 years of sealed records, contradictory tallies, witnesses who would lie, names powerful enough to bury an omega without consequence. Vaelith returned to the hall knowing exactly what she had agreed to. She worked without pause. Cross-referenced patrol routes, tracked ledger hands, compared punishment records with disappearance rates. She slept on stone and ate what little she was allowed. By the 4th night, she had the truth. By the 5th, she had the proof. By the 6th, everyone who mattered knew what she was doing. Eyes followed her now with something sharper than desire. Fear. When she delivered the completed audit to Malrek, she did not look triumphant. She looked tired and unafraid. "You understand what this costs you," Malrek said. "Yes." He took the report, read it once, then again. "From this moment," he said, "you will have enemies with names, with power, with memory." Vaelith met his gaze. "I already do." Malrek nodded once. That was when she understood why he had watched in silence. He was not waiting for her to need him. He was waiting to see if she could survive being seen. They caught her with him. That was how the story spread. Fast, gleeful, sharpened for maximum damage. Vaelith was dragged into the public square by sound alone. Whispers turning into gasps, gasps into certainty. At the center stood Rathan, ranked, flushed, his tunic torn just enough to suggest urgency. Her hair was loose. His handprint still burned on her wrist. Ophira stepped forward before Vaelith could speak. "There," she said, voice trembling with practiced restraint. "This is what we've been enduring." Rathan laughed once, rough and false. "She came to me," he said, "promised discretion. Power favors patience, doesn't it?" A few males shifted uncomfortably. A few leaned in. "Look at her," Ophira continued, circling Vaelith like a judge. "Always alone, always refusing, and yet never untouched. She provokes, then cries victim. Valeth said nothing. Speak, someone demanded. Deny it. Rathan smirked. Go on. Tell them how you didn't want it. The words hit like bait. Valeth lifted her eyes to him. Remove your hand from me. He tightened his grip instead. You didn't mind earlier. The square stirred. Confusion, heat, anticipation. Ophira seized it. You see? Manipulation. Seduction by refusal. She makes men beg, then claims innocence. Malrek Ashbourne watched from above. Silent. Unmoving. Valeth inhaled once. Deep. Measured. Let him speak, she said. Rathan blinked. What? Tell them, Valeth said calmly. What you offered me in the grain corridor 3 nights ago. Ophira's eyes narrowed. This is deflection. Valeth reached into her satchel and withdrew a slim ledger. It's documentation. She opened it. Rathan offered protection in exchange for access. When I refused, he threatened to report me for misconduct. Rathan laughed, too loud. You expect them to believe? Valeth turned the page. Here is the witness statement, the bribe request, the reassigned patrol that followed my refusal. Murmurs sharpened. Rathan's grip loosened. And this, Valeth said, voice steady, is today's incident, recorded by 2 scribes positioned exactly where Ophira suggested they stand. Ophira went very still. Valeth finally pulled her wrist free. The red marks were unmistakable. He didn't catch me with him, Valeth said. He cornered me. He tried to force compliance, publicly, because he thought you'd protect him. Silence crashed down. Malrek descended the steps. Rathan, he said, you are stripped of rank, effective immediately. No, Rathan started. Guards moved. The crowd parted. Valeth closed the ledger and looked at Ophira at last. This was a setup, she said quietly. You just chose the wrong Omega. The women didn't look away this time. They recalculated. Malrek Ashbourne did not summon Valeth immediately. He waited 3 days, long enough for rumors to rot, long enough for Ophira's allies to regroup. Long enough for Valeth to feel the shift, respect curdling into something sharper, more dangerous, not hatred, calculation. When the summons finally came, it was not to the throne hall. It was to the map chamber. Malrek stood with his back to her, hands braced on the table, studying the pack's borders like a man already at war. You embarrassed them, he said without turning. They embarrassed themselves, Valeth replied. A pause. Careful, Malrek said mildly. That tongue will cost you leverage. I don't use it for leverage. That earned her his full attention. He faced her then, close enough that his authority pressed against her senses, not as threat, but as weight. He did not reach for her, did not soften. I will sponsor you, Malrek said, formally. The words landed hard. Sponsorship meant rank by proximity. Access to restricted records, authority borrowed from the crown itself. And the cost? Valeth asked. Malrek's mouth curved faintly. You learn quickly. Obedience, he continued. When I give an order, you execute it. No debate, no hesitation. Valeth nodded once. Distance, he added. You do not touch me. You do not claim me. You do not use my name as shield or lure. Her jaw tightened, but she nodded again. And finally, Malrek said, I will not protect you from the pack's women, or the men you unmake. You will stand alone. Silence stretched. Valeth understood exactly what he was offering. Power without comfort, authority without shelter, a public target painted across her back. I accept the role, she said. Malrek's gaze sharpened. Not the man? She met his eyes. Not the man. Something unreadable passed through his expression. Respect, perhaps, or relief. Then you will be known as my sponsored asset, he said. You will answer to me alone. The news spread within the hour. By nightfall, Valeth felt the change. Eyes no longer slid away. They measured, counted, weighed distance. Males who once wanted her now feared crossing her. Women who once dismissed her now studied her for weakness. She was no longer untouchable. She was targetable. And Malrek Ashbourne watched from his throne as the pack turned its full attention on the Omega who had chosen power over protection. If this alliance just raised the stakes for you, stay sharp. Like and subscribe, and support the channel by clicking the hype button. The hunt has changed. The first name reached Valeth at dawn. Not shouted, not accused. Slid across her work table on a folded order slip bearing Malrek's seal. Confirm, advise, execute if necessary. No instructions beyond that. The report detailed a quiet pattern. Patrol routes altered, response times delayed, a healer reassigned hours before an ambush. 3 deaths already recorded as bad luck. Valeth read it once, then again. Then she opened the ledgers. By midday, she had reconstructed the truth, not from testimony, not from confessions, but from absence, gaps in supply chains, missing signatures, punishments reassigned to the wrong dates. Someone had learned to kill without touching a blade. She wrote her recommendation in precise ink. Guilty. Coordinated treason. Removal advised. The steward hesitated when he saw it. This name carries blood rank. Blood does not negate math, Valeth replied. By nightfall, the execution was done. No spectacle, no crowd, just a body removed from the future. The second decision came easier, the third faster. Each time Valeth verified, each time she signed, each time someone died who deserved it. The pack felt it before they understood it. Patrols tightened, whispers stopped, smiles disappeared. People learned to fear paperwork more than claws. One scribe vomited after delivering her a list. "You don't even shake," he whispered. Valeth did not look up. Why would I? Authority, she learned, killed faster than violence because it arrived dressed as procedure, because it didn't rage. It decided. Malrek summoned her after the 4th execution. "You've condemned 3 ranked wolves and 1 healer," he said. "All verified," Valeth replied. "All correct. Any doubt?" "No." He studied her then. Not her body. Not her scent, but the steadiness of her hands, still stained with ink. "You understand what you're becoming," Malrek said. "Yes." "And you accept it." Valeth met his gaze. "Someone has to." Silence stretched between them, not tense, not soft. Solid. "For the record," Malrek said at last, "I would have made the same calls." Valeth inclined her head. Not gratitude. Recognition. As she returned to the hall, she felt the pack pulling away from her, not in hatred, but in instinctive fear. Blood had been spilled, not by claws, by her pen. The rebellion did not begin with claws. It began with silence, missed patrol reports, delayed messengers. Gates opened a breath too late. The kind of mistakes that looked harmless until you stacked them together and saw the shape they made. Valeth saw it coming 3 days before the first howl. She marked the pattern quietly, mates of the executed men gathering in private corridors, supplies redirected for mourning, council requests delayed by hours that mattered. Grief had learned to wear strategy. "Their anger isn't loud," she told Malrek in the map chamber. "It's coordinated." He studied the marked routes. "You're certain?" "Yes. They're waiting for a trigger." "The inner ring?" he asked. "They'll fold," Valeth said. "Status matters more to them than loyalty." Malrek's jaw tightened. He believed her. The first breach came at dusk. A watchtower fell without a fight. Guards reassigned earlier that day by Lysentha's recommendation. Alarms rang too late. A gate opened from the inside. The pack erupted. Malrek moved like fire, command snapping, forces mobilizing, but the damage was already spreading. Then the proof arrived. Valeth intercepted a sealed message intended for an outer pack. Bryalin's mark was on it, Ophira's approval beneath, an offer of access, sanctuary, marriage alliances in exchange for safety, betrayal, neatly phrased. "They're selling the pack," Malrek said quietly. "They're saving themselves," Valeth corrected. When the rebels struck the inner keep, Valeth was already there, positions reassigned, corridors narrowed, escape routes sealed. She had anticipated desperation. The rebellion burned itself out in less than an hour. Afterward, as bodies were counted and traitors bound, Malrek stood beside her in the wreckage, blood on his armor, ash in his hair. "You knew," he said. "Yes." "Why didn't you warn me sooner?" Valeth met his eyes. "Because you needed proof. And they needed to choose." Malrek studied her as if seeing her for the first time. Not as an asset, not as a weapon, but as a woman standing unbowed in the aftermath of his pack's collapse. Something shifted. Dangerously. He reached out, then stopped himself, hand curling back into a fist. "You should have been protected," he said. Valeth's voice was steady. "You promised you wouldn't." A breath passed between them. Loaded. Unspoken. Malrek looked away first. "You're changing this pack," he said. Valeth watched the traitors being led away. It was already broken. And for the first time since he'd begun watching her in silence, Malrek Ashbourne wondered what it would cost him to want her. "They won't stop," Malrek said. "They'll retreat. Regroup. Try again." Valeth stood over the war table, fingers braced against the map. Eyes sharp, despite the smoke still hanging in the air. "Only if you crush them too quickly." Malrek looked up. "Explain." "Fear scatters people," she said. "Hope gathers them. Right now they still believe they can hide." She traced a short line along the inner routes. "Let them move, just enough. Let them think the keep is distracted. Let them signal their allies." Silence. "That risks lives," Malrek said. "Yes," Valeth replied evenly. "Briefly. Fewer than hunting shadows for months. They'll expose themselves. Every last one who believes the crown can be bargained with." Malrek watched her as she spoke. Not her hands. Not the map. Her. There was blood on her sleeve. Ink on her fingers. Resolve in every line of her face. She wasn't pleading. She wasn't posturing. She was deciding, the way rulers did. "You're asking me to allow treason," he said. "I'm asking you to end it," she answered. The room felt smaller. Closer. Malrek exhaled once, slow and controlled. "Do it." The order left his mouth without ceremony, and just like that, the iron decision was made. It worked. Within hours, the rebels moved, too eagerly. Messages flew, doors opened, allies revealed themselves in the act of reaching for safety. By dawn, the traitors were bound. The pack was whole again, bloodied but honest. When it was over, Malrek dismissed the guards. The room fell quiet, thick with aftermath. "You were right," he said. Valeth nodded. "I know." He stepped closer. Too close. "I trusted you," Malrek said. "With my people. My crown." She looked up, and caught the way his gaze lingered, not calculating now, but searching. Strained. Human. It happened in a breath. He leaned in, hard, sudden, his mouth finding hers with a depth that stole air and thought alike. The kiss was fierce, controlled only by how quickly it ended. Malrek pulled back as if burned. His jaw tightened. "That was a mistake. Forgive me." Valeth didn't answer. She turned and left the chamber without a word. Alone in the corridor, her pulse still thundered. She lifted her fingers to her lips, still warm, still aware, and laughed softly under her breath. Just once. Not because it frightened her, but because it didn't. If that moment caught you off guard, you're not alone. Like and subscribe and support the channel by clicking the hype button. Control is hardest to keep when power starts to feel personal. Judgment was not delivered from the throne. Valeth stood instead at the long stone table where verdicts were recorded, where ink outlived memory and mercy was never written down. The hall was full, silent. Malrek Ashbourne sat above, unmoving, but the weight in the room belonged to her. "Lysentha," Valeth said, voice even. "You enforced tradition selectively. You punished bodies instead of behavior." Lysentha lifted her chin, still clinging to dignity. "I upheld order." "No," Valeth replied. "You protected relevance." She did not raise her voice. She did not insult her. "Demoted," Valeth said, "stripped of council privileges, assigned to communal oversight under supervision." A murmur rippled. Lysentha went pale. "Ophira." Ophira's lips parted. "You can't." "Your mate benefited from diverted authority," Valeth continued. "You knew. You said nothing." Ophira shook her head, desperation bleeding through pride. "He was trying to protect us. He was trying to outrun consequence." She didn't look at Ophira when she spoke the verdict. "Your mate is stripped of rank, permanently." Ophira collapsed into her seat, breath gone. "Bryolin." Bryolin stood stiffly. "I served this pack for decades." "And now," Valeth said, "you will serve it honestly." Bryolin was reassigned beneath Valeth's authority. Oversight, reporting, correction, not exile, submission. Merith was last. She didn't argue. She didn't speak. She simply broke, hands shaking, sob caught and smothered against her sleeve. The cost of every safe choice she'd ever made came due all at once. Valeth watched without satisfaction. This was not cruelty. This was permanence. When the hall finally emptied, Malrek followed her into the corridor. "Valeth," he said softly. She stopped, but didn't turn. "I owe you another apology," he said. "For the kiss, for crossing a line I promised not to." She faced him then, close enough to see the restraint etched into his jaw. "You lost control for a moment," she said. "So did I." His breath stilled. She reached up, caught his collar, and kissed him. This time he didn't pull away. The world narrowed to heat, to certainty, to the unmistakable truth of two people who had chosen each other without permission. Malrek broke the kiss, only to rest his forehead against hers. "Come with me." She did. Malrek's chambers were silent when the doors closed behind them. Not empty. Waiting. The tension between them snapped the moment privacy settled in. His hand came up to her jaw, firm but reverent, tilting her face until she had no choice but to meet his eyes. "I won't apologize again," he said quietly. "If you stay." Valeth's pulse jumped. "Then don't." That was all it took. His mouth claimed hers with devastating intent. No hesitation now, no restraint. This kiss was slower, deeper, learned from the first mistake and sharpened by want. He kissed her like a man who had measured every boundary and chosen to cross them anyway. His lips traced heat down her throat, lingering where her pulse betrayed her. Valeth inhaled sharply when his hands found her waist, steadying her as if he already knew exactly how weak she could become, and intended to undo her anyway. "You have no idea," he murmured against her skin, "what you've done to me." She answered by threading her fingers into his hair and pulling him back to her mouth. Malrek touched her like conquest and confession all at once, his lips unhurried, devastatingly precise, learning her reactions as if they were battle terrain. Every place he kissed, every breath he drew from her, stripped away control she hadn't realized she was surrendering. When he finally pressed his forehead to hers, both of them breathing hard, she felt it. How thoroughly she had been claimed without a single word of ownership spoken. Later, When she lay against him in the hush before dawn, his thumb traced slow circles on her bare shoulder, absent-minded, intimate. "You didn't break," he said softly. "They tried. I watched. You never did." Velith smiled into the quiet, lips still tingling from his attention. "No," she said. "I became." Malrek held her closer, not as king to Omega, not as sponsor to Asset, but as a man who had finally met his equal and dared to love her anyway. And for the first time, Velith allowed herself to rest. What passed between them in his chambers was not rushed, not reckless. It was fierce and deliberate, built on tension earned and trust tested. When dawn came, Velith lay awake beside a king who no longer watched her in silence. She smiled into the quiet. Revenge had been delivered, power secured. The demand came from the pack as a single voice. It rose from the courtyard, messy, emotional, righteous, fear dressed up as tradition. She must be claimed. Velith stood before them, spine straight, hands relaxed at her sides. She could feel it, the unease behind the demand. An unclaimed Omega with authority unsettled the old order. Power was tolerable. Power without ownership was not. Malrek Ashbourne remained silent beside her. "Claiming ensures stability," Lysentha said carefully, diminished but still reaching for relevance. "It will quiet unrest." Velith turned to face the crowd. "You want quiet," she said evenly, "not justice." Murmurs spread. She did not look at Malrek when she spoke next. "I refuse." The word landed hard, again, always again, a ripple of shock, anger, relief in some. Malrek stepped forward then. "She will not be claimed," he said. His voice carried authority without heat. "Because she does not require it." He turned to Velith. "And because she has already earned a name." He raised his hand. "From this day forward," Malrek declared, "Velith shall stand as the Iron Omega, right hand of the Alpha King." Silence. Then the bowing began, uneven at first, reluctant, inevitable. The pack accepted what it could not undo. Later, in the quiet of the keep, Velith found Malrek alone by the window, the aftermath written in the set of his shoulders. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. "I did," he replied. "They needed certainty." She stepped closer. "So did I." He turned, and she saw the question in his eyes before he spoke it. "You refused them. Why?" Velith reached for his hand, steady, certain. "Because choice matters." She met his gaze, unflinching. "And because now, I choose you." For the first time, Malrek Ashbourne smiled without restraint. It was brief, real. "You're sure," he said. "Yes." He claimed her then, not with force or spectacle, but with a vow spoken quietly, binding them by consent rather than fear. By the time dawn touched the towers, the pack would know. The Iron Omega stood named. And chosen. The girl stayed at the edges of the training ring, too quiet, too thin, an Omega by scent alone, unclaimed, unguarded, watching power like it might bite her if she stepped too close. Velith noticed her immediately. Power had trained her eye that way. The girl flinched when Velith approached, lowering her gaze out of habit, out of survival. "You don't have to look down," Velith said. The girl hesitated, then obeyed. Hope is always careful the first time. That night Velith stood beside Malrek before the pack. No armor, no blade, just authority earned the hard way. "One law changes," she said. Silence followed. Not resistance, anticipation. No Omega is required to be claimed to be protected. A murmur surged. Old instincts fought it. Old fears clawed. Velith did not raise her voice. "Protection is a right," she continued. "Not a reward, not a leash, not a bargaining chip." She let her gaze sweep the crowd, males, females, ranked and broken alike. Any pack that requires ownership to offer safety is already diseased. Malrek said nothing. He didn't need to. The law passed without a vote, because power no longer argued. From the edge of the ring, the young Omega straightened. Just a little. Enough. Vaelith caught her eye and nodded once. The girl nodded back. That was how it ended. Not with blood, not with fire, with a rule that would outlive them both. Power ascension complete. The announcement was not made in whispers. Malrek Ashbourne chose the High Court. Full pack assembled, banners raised, the old stone listening. He stood alone at first. Then Vaelith joined him. No chains, no marks displayed for spectacle. She stood at his right hand because that was where she belonged. Malrek raised his voice. I have claimed Vaelith. The words struck deep, not because of dominance, but because of finality. A breath passed through the court. She was not taken, he continued. She was not pressured. She was not cornered by tradition or fear. She chose me, as I chose her. His gaze swept the pack, unyielding. She bled for this pack without spilling blood. She ruled before she was named. She carried authority when none wished to grant it. She corrected my blind spots. She saved lives with ink and judgment when claws would have failed. He turned to her then. Vaelith is not powerful because she stands beside an alpha king, Malrek said. I am stronger because I stand beside her. Stillness. She rewrote our laws. She ended a lie we called order. And she did it without asking permission. He placed his hand over hers.